on the podcast today, we have probably one of my most exciting guests. I've known him my whole life. Gosh, you know how many years it's been since? It's been 35 years since I've known you, which is insane to think about. But this is the GOAT of all umpires, and you have such a long credentials. I'm going to really try not to screw it up, but we got World Series. We have six World Series. We have combined 14 playoff series, four All-Star games, and he's been in every big moment in baseball during those 35 years. It was 74 to 2009. I'm on a roll here. I'm getting it all down. And
way to go.
He was there.
Yeah, buddy.
One of our favorite baseball players, Barry Bonds. He was there for number 715 when he broke Babe Ruth's record. So this is the GOAT of all umpires. He was like a father figure to me growing up. I grew up across the street from him, good friends with his son. And welcome to the podcast, Ed Montague Sr.
Welcome, sir.
And
thank you.
And another thing I forgot was your dad was the scout that scouted Willie Mays.
He's a scout that discovered Willie Mays, yeah.
And he played in the majors for a few years too, right?
Yeah, my dad played with Cleveland from 1928 through 32. Played against Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and a few of those other guys.
Who's Lou Gehrig?
Who?
So the guy to my right is Tim. I don't think you've ever met him, but he grew up in San Mateo. I want his knowledge of baseball, even though he looks like a buffoon next to me with the referee outfit. It's pretty impressive. So I think he might give you a run for your money on some baseball stats. And but yeah, we're excited to have you on. When we started this, we're on our 22nd one.
I think this is 22, 23
22, 23. And you're one of the first guys I was like, I got to get Ed on. Like, that's going to be the coolest interview. And yeah, we're excited. I mean, we're in Rockland. This is our set, and we have all the baseballs you gave me as a kid. I got, Willie Mays, Ryan Sandberg, Don Mattingly, George Brett. You also gave me a baseball signed by Joe Montana. I know you don't remember that, but yeah, I got all kinds of stuff from you, and it was such a cool experience to live across the street. You know, I was just always looked up to you growing up. I'm like, this is the coolest thing. But yeah, welcome on the show. And yeah, tell us how you got into umpiring. What was where you were playing baseball, right? And then how did you get into umpiring?
I couldn't hit the curveball.
No one can.
Well, I grew up in the game. I mean, I was born, in 1948, and my dad had just, we moved to Florida in 49, and he signed Willie Mays in May of 50. So we were in Florida for only a year. My brother Gary was born in Florida, but always wanted to play and stuff like that. And, it didn't happen. So I think it was my mom that suggested, she saw it in the sporting news, why don't you try umpiring? I said, no way. I didn't even like umpires, when I played Little League in high school and stuff like that. But anyway, I did. So I drove cross country to Florida and went to the umpire school, the umpire development program in 1972. And I did pretty well in the class. I wasn't in the top 5, but I was good enough to get a job out of the school. And I went to the California League my first year. My first spring training was in Casa Grande with the Giants. And that's actually where I met my wife, because she was working for the Casa Grande Dispatch, a newspaper.
Oh, that's awesome.
She was a writer. Yeah. So it was 1972 was my first year in professional baseball. So this is my 51st year in professional baseball.
So you retired in 2009 from like the daily umpiring, and then you got into kind of overseeing umpires, right? Did you get into that right after?
Yeah, well, I didn't retire on my own. I had to get out because of concussions.
Really?
And
wow. I didn't know that.
My last game in 2009, my last plate game was in Miami, and I got a concussion. I stayed in the game. I mean, and I worked the next day. I mean, I didn't miss too many games. So it was like we never really knew what concussions were early on because, you'd see stars and stuff like that. But in '09, our trainer, Mark Latant, who used to be the Giants trainer, now he was the head of the umpires, and he came to my house with his wife and said, you know what, quality of life. He says, you've had enough concussions over the years. It's time to think about retiring. So after 4,369 games,
Jeez.
I retired.
That's insane. And how is your? I mean, I played a handful of college seasons, and my body's completely messed up, and I'm only 43. How is your body holding it? Like, because I can't imagine the knees. Right? Is that the first thing that goes right when you're crouched down under there for that many games? I can't even imagine.
Well, I've had both knees cleaned out twice, two each. The shoulder and the neck, I have bulging discs. But I'll tell you that I just got off my bike and did 30 miles today on my mountain bike. down Kenyatta Road. The other day I did 42. My kids think I'm nuts, but they say, keep moving, Dad. So
Yeah, you got to keep moving. And wow, that's insane. I can't even I can't even imagine that. But Tim, I'll let Tim. Are you going to wear these glasses the whole time?
Who said that? I got to say, I think it'd be amazing to see the game after your concussion. You said you went right back into it the next day. I have a feeling you're probably facing the wrong way, calling balls and strikes. You know what I mean? But
well, the next day I went to third base. But that last game I worked, when I got the concussion, I had to warn both benches for a beanball incident. Not at me, and then I threw out the Philadelphia manager Charlie Manuel. And my partner, Jerry Lane, said, you went out just like Ted Williams. You threw out a guy, you warned both benches, you got a concussion.
That's awesome.
That's some fantastic trivia. You are in rare company there with the splendid Splinter. But, that's phenomenal. And so this is kind of crazy because I would have figured you probably started, umping at more of a little league high school level, but you basically went right into professional ball. I find that fascinating. So I didn't know that even existed, that there basically was an umpire school. Is that something that still exists? Is that a thing that?
There were two umpire schools down there. There was Bill Summers' school, which Harry Wendelstedt took over. Okay. And Harry's school is still going strong. His son Hunter runs it. And I just, what's crazy. I drove cross country to Florida. I had a Toyota Corolla. And I paid almost $70 in gas round trip.
Wow.
Every time I go to the gas station, I think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, the average gas was 36 cents. Some places it was a lot cheaper. And, I got like 35 to 40 miles a gallon. So you do the math.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That's amazing. That's a bus ride down there now. You know what I mean? Like that's crazy. But, yeah, that's phenomenal. So so you go from just going right into, like you were saying, doing sort of more spring training, and then you go into the bigs in '74. I mean, we're talking about some great teams out there, the A's, the Big Red Machines going around there. Was it like, how is that like going and seeing all of a sudden these major league fastballs and curveballs that you have to call balls and strikes on compared to just like,
Well, 74. So I went from the California League. That was my first year. And I went to spring train or instructional league in Arizona, and I was scouted by Jocko Conlon, and the Pacific Coast League office was there. So they jumped me from A-ball to AAA. So I went from A-ball to the Pacific Coast League and was there for 3 years. Now in '74, I only came up for the last two games of the Giants season because the National League office was in San Francisco. So they called my brother. My brother says, yeah, the National League. I'm saying, yeah, right. So they wanted to see me work the last couple games at Candlestick, and the Giants were playing the Padres. And I was supposed to work first base and then home plate, but the boss had to go out of town. So the first game I ever worked in the major leagues was behind home plate.
Oh, my gosh.
And it was Willie McCovey was playing for the Padres then, Tito Fuentes.
Wow.
And I remember Jim Barr, who was my neighbor up the street, on Queens Lane when Brandon and Jim Barr was a pitcher.
Oh, that's awesome.
But so I did. It was a 2 hour and 5 minute game. I still have the box score, the lineup cards from that game. The attendance at Candlestick, I think, was 1,195 people.
Yeah,
sounds about
right back then. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So in the following year, I went to spring training with the National League, 75, and then 76. I won the job, and they called me up to the National League in 76.
I'm glad you went over that, because I was going to say, I noticed that there was that break in between. It said you came up in 74 and then 76 through 99, but that makes sense that you basically got called up as sort of a
full-time in 76. And when you're talking about, I opened up in Cincinnati, which was crazy because I'm working third base the first game and standing next to Pete Rose, who I watched as a kid. Those guys already had 10 years in the big. They always seemed a lot older. And Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, Concepcion was the shortstop. Joe Morgan was the second baseman. Perez was at first. Danny Dreesen and Ken Griffey and Cesar Geronimo were in the outfield.
Wow.
Yeah.
Loaded freaking lineup there.
I was always ask you about that, about the whole Pete Rose thing. What is your stance on that? Like, I mean, he's one of the greatest hitters of all time. He made a mistake. I think everyone can kind of, admit to that, but it's like, man, one mistake for how many years did he play? Almost 20 years, right?
Yeah, he was a long time. I want to say he was like 23 years.
Time.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? I mean, I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it, or I don't want to get you in trouble or anything.
No, I'm not getting in trouble. No, I think Pete should be in the Hall. I mean, gambling in baseball, it's a no-no and stuff like that. But he was one of the most exciting players that I've seen play, and he was fun to watch. Charlie Hustle, and I was at first base when he broke Ty Cobb's record.
Oh, that's awesome!
Wow.
Which was one of the coolest things. People ask me things in baseball, and that's one of the things I remember most. I was standing there with Steve Garvey when he got the hit, and it was just cooler than school because the thought was my dad played against Ty Cobb.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
That really is. I mean, that's one of those records that I'm confident we won't see being broken anytime soon, especially with analytics now. Guys are trying to walk more than they are kids. But
never happen, yeah.
Because we were talking about it the other day, some of the most unbreakable records. I think Cal Ripken's, consecutive game streak is probably going to be the hardest one to break. But I think Pete Rose's hits is going to be real tough, and I don't think people truly understand how hard it was for him to break that record, because he was going against some of the hardest pitchers, and up until 68, that mound was still another foot higher or whatever it was. I mean, he was going against some top level pitchers.
Yeah, you're talking Bob Gibson, Koufax, Drysdale,
Marichal, he's going against Hall of Fame guys, and I mean that's really hard to do. These were some of the leanest hitting years ever. I mean, in 1968, I think only 6 guys hit 300, and he had like a 339. He blasted everyone out there. So, I mean he's just an unreal player, and I think it is a shame that we don't see him in the Hall of Fame. Like, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, I'm not trying to shit on anybody, but I don't think Harold Baines belongs in the Hall of Fame over Pete Rose. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. But
if Rose, if the gambling thing didn't happen, no doubt about it, in the Hall of Fame.
But I don't think, did he even bet on it was his own team? That was an issue, right? Or was that what they said? Or
well, it was just gambling. I mean, and he says he never bet on his own team or whatever. But Pete liked to bet. I mean, he was at the horse track, and one of I never forget this. I was working in Cincinnati, and it was the week of the Kentucky Derby. Well, the headlines all week were Pete Rose getting banners. The gambling issue came up, and Pete, he always thought he was above the game. So I remember breaking. We're at home plate, and Tommy Helms brought the lineup cards out, and I'm breaking to go to work first base, and Pete's yelling, Eddie, I'm what? And I go over, he goes, who do you like in the Derby?
That's awesome.
And I said, you're nuts. I mean, this is like...
He was, though. He was.
But you know what? He was a good guy. He was good with us. I like Pete, and,
Because he also was a manager, right? For for how many years after he played?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he was a player manager and then managed, but
I don't see.
yeah, I don't know how many
I don't
years.
think we'll see that ever again.
No.
The player manager.
You never know.
You never know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it would take like something to happen. You know what I mean? The actual manager is, sick. And then but you always have these backup bench coaches and stuff. So I don't know about that, but that is wild to me to think about that, playing and managing at the same time. It's like Bill Russell, Pete Rose. That's all I can really think of that's ever really done it successfully. But yeah, one thing I got to ask is I always love seeing when, and unfortunately every now and then you are going to call some tough calls in a game and you're going to piss off a manager. And you guys, it's one of my favorite things when that manager comes out with the head of steam and you see the ump just ready for him. What are some of the more interesting conversations you've had with managers there? What are some of the more fun things you've been called there? You could use some fun language with us here. We don't need to hold back.
I don't know about fun things, but I mean, it was crazy. I remember Bobby Cox and I got in it a few times, and nose to nose, and I think my last one that was all over the papers and stuff was Larry Boa down in
Philadelphia.
L.A.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
he was coaching with the Dodgers for Joe Torre, who ended up being my boss and hiring me. Yeah, over the years, it's just the language and stuff that's usually gets guys tossed. If they stay too long, but they question your heritage and stuff like that.
Well, what I liked about you is most umpires kind of waited for the manager to approach them. I've watched you several times. You be the aggressor, and I loved it. I'm like, oh, here's that. Here it goes. I'd be cheering for you in the stands. But I feel that is you really had an authoritative state over these guys where you would challenge them, which was kind of cool to see. You were kind of the alpha, which was really cool to see.
Yeah, they don't. Well, they really don't want umpires.
Yeah.
They want you to stay in the circle,
Yeah.
and which is home plate and not go toward the dugout. And I always said my circle was the ballpark. And the last ejection I had with Charlie Manuel, you probably YouTube all this stuff, and Charlie was questioning me on some pitches, which the pitcher lied to him, and so he's yelling from the dugout. So this was in Miami, and I went after him over in Miami, and the two of us met toward the dugout, and we're going nose to nose. And I remember the Philly announcers are going, "Wow!" He says, "Look at those two old war horses go." And
solid.
Like I said, the next day I'm working third, and as I'm walking onto the field, I see Charlie peeking around in the dugout. He was kind of hiding behind somebody, and I just looked over and gave him thumbs up, and we smiled. Charlie was a good guy. The next day was always a new day.
Well, it's like a fight, right? You get in a fight as a kid, and it's over with, right? But obviously not physical. But and was it true? There was always a story about Bill Buckner, right? The ball that went through his legs. I remember that as a kid, and supposedly, right, you were the one to pick up the ball, right? What was the story behind that? I mean, that was a big deal, right?
Well, that was Game 6 in the World Series in Shea Stadium, and the Boston, they got champagne in the dressing room, and they're ready to celebrate. And now Mookie comes up, and I'm in right field on that game. John Kibler was the first base umpire, and then Buckner just missed the ball. I mean, it just whether he peeked at it or peeked at Mookie coming down. And as the ball was coming out to right field, I remember the run scoring, which ended the game. And Marty Barrett for the Red Sox was the second baseman coming over. And I said, "I got it, Marty." So I got the ball, and I put it in my coat pocket, and I put a little mark on it. And the next day we got rained out, and then the Mets came back to win Game 7. So after Game 7, there was an executive for the Mets, real good guy, Arthur Richmond, and a good friend of ours and stuff. And he came in the dressing room, to see us after the game. Nice job and all that. And I said, "Artie, I got something for you." I said, "This is the ball that won it for you." And he didn't want to take it. I said, "This is the ball that went through Buckner's legs." Well, anyway, he ended up taking it. And a couple of years after that, he called me and asked if it was okay to auction it off for charity. And I said, "Of course, I gave it to you." And so he goes, we'll probably get $5,000 or $6,000. And I said, well, that's great,
Yeah.
Well, we were in Hawaii. My wife and I are in Hawaii, and I'm watching on ESPN early in the morning on the news, and it said a record dollar amount just went for a baseball. The ball that went under Buckner's legs sold for $93,000.
Wow.
Oh, and what year was that?
Oh, it was probably 86, probably 88, 1988. And the actor Charlie Sheen bought the ball.
Oh, wow.
But I remember after that ESPN on that same show, Buckner came on and said that wasn't the ball and that he had the ball at home in a safe, which really ticked me off. So I called back to Connecticut to ESPN. I was trying to get a hold of Chris Berman. And I said, so I called back there. I'm in Hawaii, and I'm calling back there, and I said, because I was really pissed off. And I said, it's Chris Berman, who's calling? I said, and I figured they didn't know who I was. I said, Eddie Montague. Oh, we know what you're calling about. And they said, can you do a show on the air today on the ESPN radio? I said, yeah. So I came back in from the beach about noon, and I said, I get on the show, and these two clowns, it's like Mike and Mike. And they said, he said, we understand that you had the ball, and Bill Buckner said that he has the ball in the safe. I said, well, that really ticks me off that he would question my integrity, Arthur Richmond's integrity, and the integrity of the New York Mets. I said he had his chance to get the ball the first time. How do you get it back?
Yeah.
So, but that ball just sold for $1 million.
God, who bought it? Do you know who bought it after that?
Well, it was sold again. I don't know who bought it after. It sold like for about $400,000.
Jeez.
And now the owner of the Mets, the owner who's the owner of the Mets now, he bought the ball for like $1 million. Wow. So it stays in Citi Field or whatever they call that.
So do you ever regret not holding on to it?
No.
No.
Because if I had it, it would be like some of the baseballs. It'd be in my attic.
Yeah.
It'd just be up there.
What is the I know you have a ton of memorabilia. I remember Eddie Jr., which is Ed's son. We're the same age. And I remember I think the coolest memorabilia I ever saw in your house was the Ty Cobb and Pete Rose baseball.
Whoa.
I don't know how I remember that. Like, right? What was that? 25, 30 years ago. I don't remember what I did this morning, but I remember seeing that baseball in there. What is the coolest memorabilia you have?
Well, that's probably one of the. Yeah, that's probably it. And Ty Cobb, my uncle, my dad's brother, my Uncle Fred and Ty Cobb owned a minor league team together. So that's probably where that ball came from. I swiped it out of my dad's sock drawer years ago.
Yeah.
But then when Rose broke Cobb's record, I took it back to Cincinnati with me a couple weeks after that. And I went into Pete's office, and Pete was great. He'd sign everything for us. And I said, hey, Pete, I got something, a ball. Can you sign this? And I didn't show him the Ty Cobb side until he signed it. And then I said, turn it over. And he was shocked. He goes, where'd you get this? But I've got balls from when I was a kid, my dad being around all these guys. I got a ball at home because my middle name's Mike. My dad's name was Ed. So I got a ball that says, to Mike, keep swinging the bat. Mel Ott, Carl Hubble, Lefty O'Doul. I had Mays sign that. And then my wife, Marcia, was telling me, she says, do something with all these baseballs in a bin. This was last year. So I was in there yesterday because I was looking for a special ball. But so I'm in the bin, and I find a 1954 New York Giants ball. That's the year they won the World Series.
Wow.
And the signatures are like they wrote it yesterday. It's unbelievable.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I have, just from knowing you, I have a whole bag full of baseballs that I recently went through, and like a 94 World Series ball. And I can't even imagine what you have. I mean, I got, the scraps. I'm like, leave me alone, Brandon. Here's this ball, and I mean, I probably have 100 baseballs just from growing up across the street from you. But yeah, we have I think the 94. What was the World Series that didn't happen?
That was 94.
94.
94. And when that happened, I remember I bought, because if I was working a World Series, I would call back to Rawlings or whoever was making the balls, and I'd order like 6 dozen.
Yeah.
And then I'd pass them out. And so that when I saw that thing was canceled in 94, I went and bought 6 dozen balls. I gave most of that stuff away.
I got one.
I don't know.
Thank you.
I don't know if you remember, like at Halloween, I used to give out baseballs at the house.
Yeah, I do remember that.
That's awesome.
Kids would go back and change their costume. Come back.
Genius. So you were set to ump the 94 World Series if it was going to go through?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. But
okay.
I just thought, well, I'll order those balls because that'll be something that never happened.
Oh yeah, super unique situation. I mean, the only time it's happened in our lifetime, and probably will be the only time in our lifetime that we won't see a World Series. I mean, even that 2020 fake playoff run in World Series happened. You know what I mean? It didn't really count.
That didn't count, especially the Dodgers won.
It doesn't count, but it happened. It sort of happened. It was like a little league playoff game. It is what it is. But I did want to ask you a couple things. One thing is you're getting such a unique perspective behind the catcher there. Was there any pitcher in particular that was difficult for you to call their games because their ball maybe moved so much or was so fast? I often heard that Nolan Ryan was a hard guy to call because that fastball was on so quick and you couldn't necessarily know where it landed.
Yeah, Nolan Ryan, but I liked working him. But Nolan cracked my mask.
Oh.
Cracked my shin guards. I was working a game in L.A. It was a playoff game, Houston and the Dodgers. And I was working first base, and we had a runner on, so I was up close for a pickoff, and he threw to first base and hit me right in the shins. Killed me.
I can't. It's like the worst case scenario.
But he was, I don't know what radar would have his pitch at, but he was well over 100, and it jumped. It exploded when it came off, out of his hand. But there's so many. Tom Seaver, Steve Carlton. They were all great to work, Maddox.
I would think calling a Maddox game would be one of the best because it's pretty quick. I mean, that guy was so efficient. You're not going to have a whole lot of time in between, having to readjust between each pitch. I mean, that guy worked quick. Is that something?
Worked quick.
Yeah, you appreciated that, I assume, back there, right? You could just.
Yeah, he was like, you have to wait 2 minutes and 10 seconds or 20 seconds now, or 2:05. And he's out on the mound ready to pitch in a minute. And then best control pitcher I've ever seen. It was like he was throwing darts. And if you stood behind him and you're watching him pitch, you'd think, I could hit this guy. That's what players would think.
No one could.
No. He was great. Greg was a good guy and a great pitcher, yeah.
And did you ever was there ever a point in your career where you got nervous? Like your first World Series or...
Oh, yeah, you get the butterflies and stuff. But after, a few pitches and stuff, then you're locked in. And, I think 97, I worked game 1 behind the plate. I was a crew chief. Well, I was a crew chief in 4 World Series, and I was a crew chief in 3 out of the 4 All-Star games. And there's only been 2 other umpires to do that, Al Barlick and I think Summer. I'm trying to think of the other guy. But then I had to work game 7 in the 97, and there's 60 or 70,000 people in Joe Robbie Stadium, and the game won 11 innings, and Renneria knocked in Greg Counsell.
Is it the Marlins, right?
Yep.
In the 11th inning to win it. Yeah.
I was going to say, you did 6 different World Series. A few of them went 7 games. A couple of them were quick sweeps. I know your last couple were the Red Sox just mauling people. Was there one in particular that stands out to you as being maybe a little more special, a little more exciting? Sounds like it's probably that 97 one just because it went so far.
Well, 97 and then the 86 World Series because it was my first World Series.
Yeah.
And the first time I've been in Fenway Park.
Wow.
Because I was National League. And then I worked game 5 behind the plate in Fenway Park with Dwight Gooden and Bruce Hurst pitching. And so the 86, your first one's always something. And then, of course, I worked in 91. That one extra innings, too. I worked game 6 behind the plate when Kirby Puckett hit a walk-off. So that was pretty cool.
That's what I'm saying. You had some really exciting series as you were a part of. I mean, that 86 one, those are known for being some of the most intense series. So, I mean, that's, and it wasn't ever a thing where, oh yeah, there was that bad call that set this game up. It was just well-played series. So hats off to you, because almost
knock
always,
on wood.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm saying, because almost always there's a major call that someone says, oh man, this call that someone, I'm trying to remember. I want to say it was like in the 82 World Series or something, where they said that, the Cardinals probably should have gotten away with something there, and then wound up going the Royals' way, and then they wind up winning the game, wind up winning the whole series, and people still point to that and say, no, it doesn't count. It shouldn't have counted. There's the Armando Galarraga's perfect game that wasn't a perfect game because of a missed call at first base, and
it's a shame, because right after that perfect game, almost perfect game, replay came in.
Yep.
So if we had replay, those guys. Matter of fact, when I was working the Red Sox in 2004, I remember Harold Reynolds called me out the day before to interview me out in the outfield. And I'm thinking, because I was a crew chief and he wanted to know about working the World Series, and he says, tomorrow's the date that Don Dinkinger missed that call at first. I said, Carol, don't bring that shit up. I mean, because you think about that. You want to, and I was very lucky to get through all those postseason games and stuff without a glitch. So, but you got to be lucky too. So,
was there one player that kind of irked you at all? I do remember you saying, I don't know if you want to say it on camera, but you had a name for him that I don't even know if I could say, but there was one player that you particularly didn't like. Was there someone that just irked you, or just like, this guy is such a punk, or anyone that you didn't like that just kind of rubbed you the wrong way, if you want to say?
Not really, because, you got into it with certain guys, but like I say, the next day was always a new day. It's the guys that didn't
let it go.
There weren't too many that didn't let it go. Like I say, Bobby Cox was thrown out more than any manager in baseball.
Yep.
Yeah. And I've got a great picture of Bobby and I when we were younger, nose to nose and stuff. But I'll say, Bobby was the type of guy that you would toss out of a ball game. You go nose to nose with him. And I always said, we parked in the same parking lot in Atlanta. And if I was out in the parking lot and I saw him there and I had a flat tire, he'd help me change the tire.
That's cool. Yeah, it's just part of the game, right?
It's part of the game. I mean, I learned from Joe Torre. Joe Torre and I got into it when he first was a player manager with the Mets. And I think, I don't know, I tossed him a couple times. I must have tossed a few of those Mets that month, and I mean, I wasn't giving in. I wasn't going to give up. And they tested me, and finally Torrey came to me, or he called me, said, can I come over to his office? And he says, look, we got off on the wrong foot. Let's start over. The next 30 years, I didn't have a problem. Joe and I never had words or anything. Matter of fact, when I came off the field in 2009, Joe called me the following year because he was the boss and asked me if I wanted a supervisor, and he gave me some nice accolades, saying he had a nice career, this and that, did this and that. But at the end, he says, do you ever think the guy that you threw out of so many games will be offering you a job?
This came full circle.
I love it.
Well, I think it was Jeff Kent. That was him. Remember, I think you guys got into it a couple times.
Yeah, but I like Jeff. I got along good with him after that.
Because we were
I think I tossed him once in Chicago. He wasn't on me. He was on my partner at first base, one of the younger guys.
Oh, God.
I blasted him, and then I ended up tossing him.
Because we were at Sea Cloud over in Foster City, and it was the year that he blew his knee or something. He was rehabbing, and we were going to go play home run derby as kids. And Jeff Kent's out there during the season. And, we're like kids, like 13, 14, like, hey, you want to play home run derby with us? And he was just kind of short with us and just, kind of a dick, to be honest. And we're like, man, how cool. Yeah.
That's how he was. He was just like, and I remember, but I got along with him. And there's another guy that should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he had a great career.
Phenomenal, especially second baseman with that kind of pop. MVP.
Yeah.
So so would you consider yourself a Giants fan? Like growing up or you didn't grow up? Well, you grew up in the Bay, San Bruno, right? You went to
I had to be a Giants fan. My dad worked for him for over 40 years.
So was that hard to go to Giants Stadium? Did you ever have that?
Once you start umpiring, I mean, you come out there, you're a little in awe of, I'm there with McCovey. Mm-hmm. I mean, Willie McCovey used to carry my younger brother Mike around on his shoulders when we go into the clubhouse when we were kids. We go into the clubhouse and we'd see all these guys. Willie Mays, the one thing I regret is Willie retired before I started umpiring in the big leagues. So I would have liked to have seen that. But once these guys are yelling at you from both sides of the fence, you lose that fan instinct. Yeah. So it was no big deal to stay focused and concentrate on the game because now you got a job to do and you better do it right.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about All-Star games. I got to wonder about that. What's the atmosphere like at an All-Star game? Is it a little more relaxed because it's not, a regular season game? I mean, are you really able to take in the whole, thing and enjoy it with the guys, or is it still work for you at that point?
Oh no, the All-Star games are fun. Brandon, you came down, didn't you? Did you come, or was it just your mom and dad?
That was the one where you were singing with Tim McGraw. Was that one of the All-Star games?
That was in Colorado. Yeah, it was. Because it was Harold Reynolds. No, that was in Houston, and I'm out there, and Harold Reynolds was, "Eddie, why don't you get up and sing?" Because as a kid, I wanted to be a singer, and so I got up there. But
you singing with Tim McGraw, like how cool is that?
Pretty awesome.
No, the coolest thing was I sang with Garth Brooks.
Oh, Garth Brooks, that's who it was. It wasn't Tim McGraw, but you probably sang with him too, right?
Well, Garth Brooks, I was in spring training.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah,
and he was down there with the Padres.
Yep, I remember that. Yeah,
and he came in to pinch run. Bochy was managing the Padres, and Garth came in to pinch run, which we probably shouldn't have allowed the boss because of insurance reasons. Mm-hmm. But it's Garth Brooks. I mean, I was a Garth Brooks fan then. So he comes in, he leads off at first. He's going to pinch run, and I said, "Now don't get picked off." A left-hander throws, and he picked him off from here to the trees.
Oh, he got picked off?
He got picked off, and he looks up at me, and I looked down at him, and I went, "Safe."
That's awesome.
And the whole Cubs dugout jumped up. I said, "I'm not calling out Garth." And he jumped off the bag and gave me a big hug. And the first baseman tagged him. I said, "He's still safe." So then we became kind of friends. And the next year, I said, "My wife's coming down and if she brings my guitar, can you sign it?" And he said, "Absolutely." So we're in Mesa, and he came up into the dressing room, and he's signing my guitar. And I said, "Well, why you got that in your hands?" And I said, "Why don't we do a little bit of the dance?" So he started playing, and I was singing.
Wow, that's
so we got that on tape.
Yep.
And then he invited us down to Vegas when he was doing his one-man show. Brooke, my daughter, and Brett. I think Brett came, and Marcia and I, and we went down to his show, and then we went backstage. And Garth was great, and Trisha Yearwood was there. They're like if you met them and they walked in, you think they were like your next door neighbors. They're just the coolest people ever. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah. And so that was kind of like a all-star game environment, right? With those kind of people, or it's kind of fun, right? It was loose.
Yeah, because I would bring the families down and friends and stuff, and I'd bring them in the dugout to watch the home run derby, and yeah, Brett was in Houston with me, and as we're standing in the hallway there, here comes Derek Jeter and A-Rod are standing there.
Who?
And those guys are rookies. And he says, Jeter says, "Hey, Eddie, you might want to get your camera out because here comes the champ, Muhammad Ali."
Wow.
And so he came up, and I took a picture, and he took Brett's fist, and he put it right up in his chin. The only thing is, I had my wife's camera. I didn't know how to work. And Jeter says, "Eddie, your flash didn't go off." So I told Brett, I said, "Hey, we're going to follow him." And he went into the American League dressing room. So we went in there, and he's got Parkinson's, and he couldn't really talk, but he sat down on the couch, and so Brett didn't want to go in. He goes, "Dad, I'm not going to bother." I said, "Go sit on the couch." And so Ali signed Brett's shirt and took a picture with him, which I've got in a big frame. And
that's awesome.
Those are the fun things that happen. You meet so many people over the years, and it's so many people working.
And then as a National League umpire, we're obviously Giants fans here. We got candlestick seats over here, and watching Barry Bonds was, we were in awe. I mean, just one of the greatest power hitters, just average hitters,
pure hitters,
of all time. What is your stance on that? That's a rough one, right? Because he is the greatest of all time. He's never admitted to doing steroids, right? But I mean, look at his body. It was pretty obvious. But if before the steroid era, he would have been a Hall of Famer before those years.
Yeah.
And we talk about it all. He actually educated me on the Hall of Fame. It's the writers, right?
Yeah,
majority of the writers
are the ones who vote.
And Barry well, and he wasn't great with the media, right? Like the media, he wasn't the very short with them and didn't like them. What is your stance on him? Like, he's got to be in the Hall of Fame. Like, it's frustrating, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've known Barry since he was a young kid. I umpired when his dad was playing, and one of the greatest pure hitters I've seen. I mean, Tony Gwynn, Al Oliver, those guys were great hitters. But Barry was like when I stood behind him, it was like a home run waiting to happen. And it's a shame that all that stuff came down, the steroid era and things like that. But to me, he's a Hall of Famer.
When you're umping and Barry Bonds is dialed in as he is at the plate and he doesn't swing at a pitch, are you just more inclined to call it a ball?
No. No, but usually, you just I had only one time Barry, he stood out and he put his hand up. He thought the pitch was high. I said, "Put your hand down," in so many words. and we kind of laugh about that today. I mean, that's the only time. But he never bothered the umpires. He was a guy that if he struck out, his demeanor didn't change. He'd go into the dugout. He'd put his helmet up calmly and stuff like that. So, he was something for kids to watch, I mean, he was,
Yeah, he really did act like a professional on the field for the most part. But I don't think I've ever seen anyone with that kind of an eye. I mean, there was a stat where he hit a home run every 10 swings during, I think it was 2004. Not every 10 at-bats, every 10 swings. Because there was just so many pitches that were, not anywhere near or just, slightly off, but he knew they were balls. He would take balls that everyone else is swinging at, and it was just phenomenal. And that's one of those things, like, he definitely, got more power, it seemed, over the years, especially when your hat size increases, by a few. But his eye was always just incredible. He was always a patient hitter. And that's one of the things that, all these analytics look at now is these guys that they want guys that are walking. But to me, it's like you want guys that walk but can also hit. You want Frank Thomas. You want Barry Bonds. You don't necessarily want, Schwarber, who's going to hit, under 200 and, still get on base for you. But yeah, I got to think you've seen just some incredible talent out there. You were, I think, second base when Bonds hit number 715, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what's that like? I mean, in the crowd when you're hearing all that, when you're seeing all that.
And he got me in trouble too. He says, so he came out, and it's a moment like Pete Rose and stuff like that. You see that. So Barry came out, and my partner Jerry Lane at third base shook his hand. So Barry came out, and I said, "Hey, nice going." I went to shake his hand, and he gives me a big hug, and he says, "That's for you." And I'm thinking, get off me. So it doesn't look good. So the league fined me $700 or $750, and I didn't pay it. They fined me for. I said I didn't hug Barry. Barry hugged me.
Yeah.
I said I just said congratulations and stuff like that. But that was pretty awesome.
So when he hit the home run round in first, he stopped and gave you a hug.
No. When he was going out to the outfield.
Oh, got it. That's amazing. I ran into he was a pitcher for the Giants off and on. He was in, his name was it was a friend of a friend. I think it was John Cooper was his name. I could be a little off, but he was pitching for the Giants, right? He was telling me the story, and it was so classic Barry Bonds. So Barry got the day off, right? So he's in his big chair in the dugout in his, in his boxers, and it's like, 1-0. The guy, Cooper, throws like 7 innings, 7 1/3, like gives up, I think it was like 1 run. They were down 1 run. And he comes in, they bring in a reliever. He comes in, and Barry, instead of saying, "Hey, great game," he like rolls his eyes. He's like, "Watch, they're going to make me hit now." Instead of like, it was the game of his life, right? He was kind of up and down in the minors. He pitched a game of his life, and he goes to see Barry, and Barry rolls his eyes at him. He's like, "Man, now I'm going to have to hit." Sure enough, 9th inning comes around. He gets the call. He like has some explicitive, phrase. And my buddy's there, the friend of a friend. He's like, "Dude, I just pitched the game of my life," but he's not going to say anything to Barry. He goes up there, hits a 2-run shot to win the game. Like, just insane. But that was Barry. I mean, he was not the best with people. That I feel like with the people that were close to him, he was amazing, but he didn't let a lot of people in. And I get that.
No. Yeah.
But
there are a lot of players like that. I mean, Randy Johnson, it was a pain. and I remember screaming at him. I was at third base, and I think Paul Schreiber was the home plate umpire, and he was all over Paul. And so I just jumped him from third base and and I remember Louis Gonzalez and Steve Finley were coming in from the outfield. They said, "Eddie, don't let him bother you. He's like that with us." And then I'm supervising. I'm down in spring training, and I'm going into one of the empty suites because I just sit up there and observe and take notes. So there's a guy sitting in there, and it was Randy Johnson.
Wow.
And I went, and he looks, it couldn't have been nicer. It was like a different guy. When they're off the field and the pressure's not there, it was a whole different ball game. He was great to talk to, and yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like when we introduce you, right, 35 years as an umpire and so many accolades, I always, people that know about baseball, I'm like, yeah, I grew up across the street from Ed Montague. They all know who you are, right? They all know, like, yeah, I know exactly who that is. But that's rare. I mean,
they've all screamed at me one time.
Yeah, but these are just fans. People I run into. We start shooting the shit, and I'm like, yeah, they look at my baseballs. I'm like, I grew up across the street from Ed Montague. They all know you, and that's rare, right? Because mostly umpires, referees are behind the scenes, but I feel like the way you umpired the game, your integrity, and how you didn't I love that you didn't take shit from anyone, and it was, and I always, but I think that's a testament to your career and how awesome it is that people recognize and know who you are. And they all have great things to say about you and the best stories, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, it's been a good ride. And like I say, I love still going out to the ballpark and I think I know every usher in that ballpark and love talking to people and stuff like that. And yeah.
And then what umpire did you want to talk about?
Oh, well, I was going to say, I think the one that's probably under the most criticism and fire these days, I mean, I think you know where I'm going with this, and that's our buddy Angel Hernandez. So, he's getting a lot of negative press for the way he's been handling some things. For instance, that last one was the Bryce Harper call on the strike 3. Didn't look like it went around to me. I mean, I'm sitting on my couch, so it's hard for me to say. But how you're overseeing all these guys? Are you having to deal with a lot of stuff like that? Like
I hear about Angel all the time, and you know what? People don't know. Angel is probably one of the nicest guys in baseball. Very religious, and I always thought he was a good umpire. Angel's, of course, he's getting a little older now, but the way he handled and stays in shape and in positions he was getting in and stuff, I think he gets a bad rap because when you start out, just like Bob Davidson, same thing. Bob got a balking Bob. They start out to get a bad rap, and it's tough to let that image go and stuff like that. No matter, people just remember, and then everybody jumps on the bandwagon. But like I say, Angel, if people knew him, they wouldn't be so hard on him.
I mean, it's easy to hate the guy in the stripes, the guy in the blue, because it's an easy scapegoat. My team didn't do well, but it was the third base guy. He called him out when he should have called him safe. It's a lot easier. And I got to say, it's sort of a testament to what Brandon's saying, to have done the job for 35 years, to be as well known and well respected as you are without being so hated. That's pretty impressive. So you definitely did something right there. And I want to give you massive amounts of credit for that, because that's hard, man. Like I said, I've had to call kickball games when I was teaching kids, and I mean, I nearly had to kick kids out of my programs. I'm like, you were out, Ethan. Okay, don't fight me on this. It's like, I'm sorry, and even if I was wrong, it's the call. We just have to move on. It is what it is, And but yeah, I was going to ask you, what do you think's the toughest, close call to make? Is it a ball that's close to being a strike or a ball, or is it that runner going to first base and the ball gets into the first baseman's mitt? Because I think that one might be tougher. A few more moving parts. You got to look at different parts of the body. Is that one of the toughest calls to make on the field?
No, I think the toughest call is the one we're talking about, the check swing.
Mm.
The check swing and a swipe tag. But now, they've got replay, but of course they can't use replay for the check swings, but so a swipe tag where a bad throw to first base, you're getting into position. Now you got a bad throw, you got to adjust. And you got to adjust to the bad throw. And a lot of times it's that swipe going by, and that's a tough call to see. A trap ball in the outfield. But like I say today,
it's replay.
I can make a comeback. I mean, I can't imagine Bobby Cox coming out on me today and saying, "Hey, Eddie, how's the family? Everybody good? Hey, you mind looking at replay? Oh, no problem." That wouldn't be any fun.
Yeah.
And did you ever, as I know, there's been talk with getting rid of the umpire, right? With all the computers and, all the sensors and all that. Obviously, you got to be completely against that. But do you think that's ever going to be a reality? I hope not. It'd be a shame for the game.
I don't think the players want it. I mean, we got a few guys that are a little goofy that want that. I mean, like Kruko tells you, he says, when that happens, I'm quitting.
Yeah.
They don't. The game of baseball, I mean, they keep changing stuff. I don't like that, but just leave the game alone. It's a great game.
What rule that they've added that you're not, I guess, too excited about? I mean, I think the replay, that's a big deal, right, for baseball, but I think that was a good rule. But is there any ones like the timing, right, for the pitcher has a certain amount of time and the pitch clock?
Well, I like the pitch clock. I mean, because the game had just gone to where guys are walking around the mound, guys are fixing their wristbands, they're waiting for their walk-up music and stuff like that. When I came up in '76 for good, the average game time was about 2:20, 2:25. I've had games. I had a game in Philadelphia, and it was the All-Star break was coming up, and I'm working in Philadelphia, and I'm going to come home to San Francisco because we only had 3 days off during the whole season. Now they have vacations. But I worked the game in Philly. It was Jim Cott and Freisleben from San Diego, and I think it was an hour and 28 minutes, the game.
Oh, wow.
We all made our flights.
Yeah, no, I was going to say I actually kind of like the pitch clock a little bit. I like the idea of, guys taking a timeout, because I remember one time I was watching a game, and I want to say about 3 or 4 minutes went by and not a single pitch got thrown. It was one of those things where, a guy stepped off the mound, then he threw over to first base to a guy that wasn't even taking a lead off the bag, and it was just like, I get it. You're stalling for time. You're trying to mess with someone's timing, but it does draw people away. And so I do kind of like the idea of there's a little bit of time, and you get the ability to take a timeout as a batter or a pitcher. I think that makes sense. I think that's something good about that. But I do tend to agree with you. It seems like every year the playoffs is slightly different. Every year, you're expecting something else. Like, oh, that rule changed. The one that bothered me, but I have to say, I maybe I was wrong. Was fighting the DH, the universal DH. I always liked having pitchers hit.
I'm still against the DH, and I don't like the ghost runner at second base.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it, but you're changing the game. I mean, Gehrig, Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, all those guys back then, they didn't have all this stuff.
Yeah.
Did you ever? Was there ever a time that you caught like a pitcher with pine tar or? Like the George Brett, remember that when you get the home run and they call him out. Were you ever part of anything like that?
Well, yeah, that's funny because I was telling you I was looking for a baseball in the bin out there.
Yeah.
Because we're doing a book. We're writing a book. It's almost done. Marcia's writing this book. And so I was looking for the baseball that I had. I was working a game in Pittsburgh, and Rick Rhoden was a pitcher. And Rhoden would scuff the ball. And I think he got it from Don Sutton when they both played for the Dodgers because Sutton, they'd scuff it across the top. Well, this one game I'm working, and I think that they were playing the Dodgers. Rhoden was pitching for the Pirates. And Lasorda knew about this, so Lasorda had me go out and check. And I already had put one ball in my pocket. I put the second one, scuffed. So I went out and I said to Rick, I said, knock it off. I said, or you're done. I get another one of those, you're done. Well, after the game, I had Eddie with me, and Eddie was only like 7 years old, or 6 or 7. And we're in Three Rivers, and we're walking down the hall, and I see Rhoden coming out of the Pirate locker room. And I I say, hey, Rick, this is my son Eddie. I said, hey, will you sign this ball for him? And I had him sign the ball. And I said, turn it over. And he turned it over. He says, you son of a... So that's the ball I was looking for today.
Wow.
Because we're talking about that in the book about cheating and stuff like that. I had Sabo crack a bat and all these little rubber balls came flying out. You could see that on YouTube.
Really? And so were you behind the plate?
On Sabo's, no, I was at first base.
And you just...
And Tom Hallion was working home plate, and Tom brought the bat out to me. And we had to... I had to take the bat in the dressing room, and then we had to send it back to the National League. And, so every now and then,
And did you have, was that the only case, really? Did you ever have to, like, throw somebody out? That was...
Well, I threw out, I think it was a Korean pitcher for the Diamondbacks, because he went to throw, and this thing fell out of his arm. And Mark Grace says, Eddie, what's that? I go over there, and it was gauze with like icy hot or something. And Buck Showalter came out. I said, he just can't have anything on him, whether he's hurt or not. So I had to toss him.
Oh, wow. Do you think that was impeding the ball at all, or had an issue with the ball, or is it just...
Probably not. It was probably an honest thing that he had it up, but you can't have anything like that on your person. And I wrote it up like that to the league, so he probably didn't get fined or whatever, but I couldn't leave him in the game. Here's a gauze thing with greasy stuff on the ground.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that was Byung-Hyun Kim, or was that another pitcher?
It was Kim, yeah.
Yeah, no, he was great, man. That was those Diamondbacks teams were a lot of fun to watch. It sounds like you called quite a few of their games since you're talking about Randy Johnson and
Gonzo. And
I was going to say, unless this was just one series where all these things happen. I mean, you never know.
Oh no, Diamondbacks had a lot. It was National League, so, but yeah.
Oh, nice.
So,
yeah,
because we were moving every 3 or 4 days. You work a series, you're on a plane. We traveled more than anybody in baseball.
Yeah, that was the thing. We talk about professional sports a lot on this show, and I think baseball with 162 games is just insane. Like, if I travel 3 times a month, I'm tired. Like, I can't imagine the wear and tear on your body. I mean, I feel like you get used to it, right? After a while,
you get used to it. You get, but now. In 1979, we went on strike, and after the strike, they didn't have anywhere to put the scab umpires, so they offered them a job, and so now we ended up getting 2 weeks vacation, and now that 2 weeks has turned into 4 or 5 weeks. So these guys are off 4 or 5 weeks during the season, plus they go to replay. so they'll never be an umpire. My first year or second year, I worked 162 games in the season. I worked 163.
Jeez.
Wow.
I picked up somebody's doubleheader, I guess. But the travel, yeah, because you'd go, I'd go, like I said, the All-Star game was our only 3 days off. And I'd be away from home for over a month or more.
Yeah.
And the only time I got back to San Francisco is if I was working the Giants.
And when you traveled, do they put you in coach, like as far as like a commercial plane, or
no, we flew first class
with the team, or how did that work?
No, commercial.
Oh, that's cool. They gave you a first class. I mean, you guys.
Yeah, we always flew first class. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Not bad.
Did you? We were on like as a JetBlue flight, and we saw the new first class. Have you seen that? The Mint, where it goes down to a complete bed.
I've been on those. Yeah, I've been on. Yeah, I've been on a couple of those. Not JetBlue, but different ones. And matter of fact, your dad and I, right after the bombing or stuff, the Twin Towers went down.
Yeah.
We were in New York like about 3 weeks later, and your dad and I were flying back on the same flight with your mom.
Uh-huh.
And I remember we were looking at everybody. Everybody's suspicious, Is that a terrorist?
That was crazy times. And I talked to my dad yesterday, and I'm like, yeah, Ed's coming on the show tomorrow. And he's like, you got to mention the cruise stories. So I got a great one. So,
oh, yeah.
Ed, if you guys didn't know, he loves piano bars, loves to have a few drinks. And on this cruise, I'll never forget, when they put after it was like a 7-day cruise, I think we went out of New Orleans, and we had way too much fun. And they put a portfolio underneath your door the last day to show how many drinks you had, how many charges you had. And you had, you had Brett, Eddie Jr., Brooke. We were all partying, having a great time. And I will never forget, your portfolio is so thick of charges, it couldn't get it under the door.
Yeah, well, it was the only cruise I ever went on, and I got a suite.
Yeah,
I said if I'm going to go on a cruise, so we got a suite, which was really nice. But that was the only cruise I've ever been on. That was so much fun.
Yeah,
and it was New Year's Eve.
Yeah,
we were rocking out in the middle of the ocean. It was like, wow.
Yeah, I'll never forget that. He's like, you got to bring up the cruise. But yeah, so in my house now, I built a piano bar. So I feel like you have to take some credit for that, because my first love for a piano bar was with you and your family.
And we got the piano player fired.
Oh yeah, we got him hammered. He
was hammered. But then I tried to talk to the cruise people, because I remember I was passing his tip jar around. I said, so I threw $100 bill in there, and started him off. But he was a good guy. He was really good. And the next day we found out that they let him go, and I thought, that's not right.
Yeah.
So it was New Year's.
Yeah. And my dad has. That's his thing. He loves buying. We went for my 30th, and there's this little band. There's this little room where it's kind of subtle, not really much going on. And my Uncle Frank was there too. I'm sure you remember my Uncle Frank. He's a character as well.
Jets fan.
Oh yeah. Another rough year for him. But
we love Uncle Frank.
They were feeding this band, this little tiny hole in the wall band, and after an hour, my Uncle Frank and my dad got that band so hammered. They were just slurring. It was the best, but
they said it was the best experience they had, because we did the 3-day cruise, the little Ensenada, quick in and out kind of thing. It's not the 7-day thing, but we went hard. That was a lot of fun. That band loved them. And at one point I remember I asked them, hey, is it okay if I come on up and do a little ditty with you guys? And they were loving it. They're like, yeah, come on up with us. And so
we were crowd surfing. It was it was fun. But
I remember smuggling bottles in Jamaica. We were smuggling cigars and bottles in our coat when we got back on the ship.
Well, and the whole boat was rocking. I'll never forget that. I mean, people are running into each other, but I'll never forget that your bill couldn't even make it underneath the door.
They had to put in a manila envelope or something just to slide it under. What the hell?
So now you're done as far as the day-to-day umpire and overseeing it. How do you like that? It's got to be pretty fun, right?
Well, I'm still doing it. I'm still like, now I'm an observer, which is I make up my own schedule. I go to the games and I do one daily report, which I just finished the last one yesterday, so it's good. But hey, so you had Senior on, Tom?
Yeah, we had Tom Brady Senior on. I'm trying to think who else who else would you know on there?
Do you know Eric Bakhtiari?
The Bakhtiaris, right? David?
I think so.
Yeah, they're I'm sure.
I was going to tell you the story. Did Tom tell you the story about when Tommy was playing for Sarah? He was catching?
No, let's hear it. This is going to be a good one.
So he's catching. Eddie's playing. Eddie's like 2 years younger, but Eddie's on that team and stuff. And so Tom and I are sitting in the stands, and Tommy just got an offer. He got drafted by the Montreal Expos. And so we're talking, and I said, well, that's great. I said, making it to the big leagues as a catcher is the fastest way to make it to the big leagues as a catcher. And Tommy's got a great arm. At Sarah, he was slow in the backfield. He wasn't his foot, and all that stuff. And so we're talking. I said, Tom, I said, I think he's got a better chance at baseball. His career will last longer. And I think he should go. Montreal's drafting him. Maybe he should go that route. Well, I wasn't a very good judge then, a good scout. So we laugh about that today. I mean, it was just turned out pretty good.
Yeah.
They say scouting skips a generation, so I wouldn't take it personally.
Yeah, it did. It did. It skipped a generation.
Yeah, and I feel like where we grew up in San Mateo, it was such a cool place to grow up, and being surrounded by the Bradys and the Bakhtiaris later on. It's just such a cool, you kind of take it for granted, and looking back, it's like, what a cool experience, to be around everything we were. And then and your son, Eddie Jr. was, man, I played with him through All-Stars and Babe Ruth. We were on the same team. And I'll never forget Eddie, every time we'd go by the house, that Cherrywood Lane, we'd hear ting, ting, ting. I mean, he'd be in that batting cage just religiously. And it's really hard to make it to the majors. It's so hard. And I remember looking at Eddie. No one had more drive than Eddie. He was a psycho with that batting cage, and no one worked harder with him. And I know he had I think he was in Vero Beach with the Dodgers for a little bit. Wasn't there something where he didn't get drafted, right? He went to junior college. He killed it at Pepperdine, absolutely destroyed it, and didn't get drafted, right?
Yeah. He went to Pepperdine in his first year. They didn't play him, and they wanted to redshirt him. And I said, forget that. And so I took him. I didn't take him. I said, Eddie, Doug Williams up at CSM wants you to come back and play. So he went back and played for Doug and was all conference CSM and stuff. And that after that season, the coach Sanchez from Pepperdine called. And he said, we really want Eddie to come back. Eddie was rooming with Dan Herron and Noah Lowry.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a great team. And he says, we want him to come back. He'll be right in the middle of the lineup and all this. And so I asked Eddie, and we'll give him a third scholarship. He was already down there on a third academic scholarship. He got an academic to Pepperdine. And so we agreed, and Eddie went back to Pepperdine. And he starts him off. And he's batting third or fourth, and he's in a slump. He's not hitting. This guy pulls him out and doesn't play him. And so I remember at the one game he had him in. He took him out of the game, and I go down underneath the stands, and I bought him this punching bag, big old heavy bag, and he's in there, and he's just beating the crap out of the bag. And I said, don't let this guy beat you. And so I remember they came to play at St. Mary's. It was a doubleheader, and all my cousins were coming to the game. He doesn't play him in that first game. And that second game, he doesn't start him. And everybody's leaving. They left and stuff. And they puts him in in about the fourth inning and stuff. And he hits a shot to right field and never stops hitting. He ended up hitting almost 400 that year.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
And then he's first team all conference with Pepperdine, and he doesn't get drafted. They told me that Milwaukee and someone was interested in stuff. So then it ticked me off, and I called Lasorda, and I said, Tommy, I said, look, see if this guy was lying to me. And he says, yeah, he was. And he says, but we saw him play, and we'll sign him. And so he called. We're sitting here in this backyard, and Lasorda calls. I said, Eddie, someone wants to talk to you. It was Tommy. He says, we're going to sign you. He says, I can't give you much money, but we'll sign you. And Tommy, they gave him $10,000 and he signed with the Dodgers.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's got to be bittersweet, right? Because as a Giants fan, I mean, Dodgers are our enemies. But yeah, so what happened with? So would he play A ball or?
He played down there with the Dodgers and then with the Vero, and then they let him go, and then he went with the Rockies. Played with the Rockies, and he played about 8 years in the minor leagues. He played independent ball
with Ricky Henderson.
He played with Ricky at San Diego.
Yeah, I remember
Ricky
that.
was on the San Diego Surf Dogs.
Yeah, I remember that.
And because it was a Dodger, it was Terry Kennedy, the old catcher. He really liked Eddie a lot. And Terry was down with the Dodgers, and so he called and asked if Eddie would come down and play in San Diego with the Surf Dogs. And yeah, Ricky was on that team. And
yeah, I always remember. I'm like, that was the one that shocked me that he never made it to the majors because he had such drive. I remember as a kid, we would be playing video games and he would just be out there in that batting cage on Cherrywood just every day. And he would just hear ting, ting, no matter when I drove by, he would just be super, just kind of psychotic with it. And I'm like, that guy, Eddie's going to go. Like, I know it. And it's,
I still think he could have played in the major. I mean, it was like, but if you don't sign for a lot of money, you got these big names. He played with a kid in North Carolina, third baseman, went on to play with the Rockies. But this kid signed for a couple $100,000 and stuff, and they're not going to take a chance on the other guy. But
it's so hard to make it. That's why, like Tommy playing all those years in the NFL, there's such a small margin. You have to be lucky. You have to be prepared, and you got to take advantage of the situation. And it's just like it's one of those that Eddie was just he had everything, but just never got the shot. It fell through the cracks. But it was awesome to watch him playing with him. To see, like I almost kind of looked up to him. We were the same age, but his work ethic, I'm sure, came from you. I remember talking to Eddie. We were in that, remember that tree fort you had, Kings Lane, in the tree
still
there?
up there, I think.
Yeah. So we were up there, and he's like, man, you know what it's like to have your dad as an umpire, like getting in arguments? And I'm like, oh, man, you never win an argument? He's like, never. Never, ever. And I always think about that. I'm like, man, that's got to be your dad's a professional arguer, like
never thought of it like that.
Yeah. Like imagine, like trying to get in an argument with your dad who, just threw out Bobby Cox and Tommy Lasorda. We always had a good joke about that, and he's like, man, like, I never won an argument. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of rough.
I imagine Big Ed walking around with the mask on and everything too. Like, you're out of here, Eddie. All right, you're done. Just ripping it off. What do you got to say to me now? You're grounded. Like, I don't know what you're doing at that point. But that's gonna be tough. Yeah, after you've had Bobby Cox in your face telling you what a piece of trash you are, your son, getting mad at you over some small thing doesn't seem like a big deal, does it? So,
well, Ed, we want to thank you for coming on the show. Yeah. It means more than you know. It's so great catching up. It's been too long. I've always admired you growing up and what you've done for baseball, and you are the GOAT of umpires. Yeah. I think undisputed. There's no one better than you that's done it, and there's a reason why you're overseeing it. I think the younger guys are going to learn a lot from you, but we really appreciate having you on the show. I know this guy's a big baseball fan. He's been so excited for this, even though he's in his referee outfit.
Holding. Holding.
But we thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate you so much. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Brandon. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
It was fun talking to you guys, and go Niners.
Yes. Yeah.